Have you ever felt the silence of your own soul? That moment when the world outside keeps spinning, vibrant, full of life, while you feel trapped in a vacuum? Watching your own dreams fade like sand through your fingers? This is the experience of the 97%, the overwhelming majority who wait for the spark of motivation, and it never comes. The smell of fresh coffee was replaced by the smell of dust and despair in my apartment. My clothes, once carefully chosen, became an eye-shapeless pile in the corner of my room. I stopped answering calls. Messages piled up, the sheet, my shield, my grandmother's birthday. Listening to the silence of my absence at my family's party, that the alarm went off. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A cutting cold that went through my soul. Not the self-help bestsellers that promised magical solutions. I, who had sought complexity, elaborate systems, epic revelations, was confronted with a premise so basic that I underestimated it. The author, a nearly unknown behavioral scientist, argued that motivation is not a prerequisite for action, but a byproduct of it. It's the cycle of momentum. But scientific articles, obscure neuroscience studies, everything I had learned, all my suffering, was based on the wrong premise. It seemed to mock me, how pathetic. And another. Not with burning motivation, but with a slight curiosity about what would happen if I continued. I didn't tidy the entire room that day, but I did pick up the socks from the floor. It was the first time in months that I had done something I set out to do, without feeling internal torture. But the author's logic was relentless. The mind cannot argue against something so insignificant. There's no room for fear. There's no room for procrastination. It's so small, it's not worth fighting. I was waiting for the spark to act. My hand hesitated, but then I picked it up. And then, nothing. No lightning. No burst of energy. But then something strange happened. My brain registered a victory. A micro-victory. Something I had started and finished. A small release of dopamine, a spark. The 3%. The minimum ignition point would not be to tidy everything up. It wouldn't even be to take out the trash. It would just be ... to pick up one sock from the floor, just one sook, and throw it in the laundry basket. They acted despite the absence of the spark. They understood that the spark ignites with the friction of the action itself. The silent truth was that the engine didn't need an external ignition. It needed a small initial push. Accounts of people who overcame deep addictions. And it was during one of those sleepless nights. The initial action must be so ridiculously small, so insignificant, that it would be impossible for your brain to argue against it. Not study a chapter, but open the book. Not exercise for an hour, but put on your running shoes. He stated that the act of completing this minimum task releases a tiny dose of dopamine, the reward hormone. This micro-reward creates a spark, and that spark is the true motivation. The 97% wait for the lightning bolt. The 3% ignite the spark. Among piles of borrowed books from the college library, which I barely attended, that I found I had nothing to lose. Not a flashy book, but a small faded monograph. The title, The Inertia of the Soul. Why movement creates will. I had no control anymore. I wasn't just losing my career, I was losing myself. I was living the cruel truth that haunts the 97%. Waiting for motivation is the world's most efficient prison. My family gathered, laughing, sharing stories. I got a call, my dad. Anna, are you coming? Your grandma's asking for you. I looked at my dark room at the cold laptop screen. The truth is, I wanted to go. I wanted to feel my grandma's hug, the smell of the cake, the warmth of family. But ... I couldn't. My body felt too heavy, my mind too blurry. I'm sick, Dad. I think I caught something. And the lie burned my throat. But it was easier than confessing that the motivation to get out of bed had died. That I couldn't even motivate myself to love the people I loved most. The sun, my enemy, reminding me of every minute of light I wasted, the shame. It weighed like lead in my stomach. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not the brilliant engineer, but a stranger with empty eyes, deep circles under them. I was a black and white portrait of a life that should have been colorful. My dreams, once so vivid, were now just distant whispers, muffled by the constant hum of inertia. I had built a fortress of self-isolation, and my world shrank to the hypnotic glow of a screen. For years, I was one of those imprisoned souls. I believed the big lie society sells us about motivation. That it's an engine that, at that point, I was willing to try anything. Literally anything. My search was no longer for motivation, but for a way out of my own skin. If it doesn't start, means there's something wrong with you. But what if I told you that's not the truth? Not just failed, exploded. Months of work, sleepless nights, hope, it all disintegrated into a cloud of dust and guilt. I took all the responsibility, and that's where the engine, which I thought was inexhaustible, sputtered and died. What if what you were looking for is hidden in a secret that the top 3% who thrive already know? A secret so shocking, so counterintuitive that no one dares to tell you. I'm here to set off the alarm in your soul and reveal how to light that flame you thought you'd lost. My name is Anna, and if you had known me a few years ago, you'd say I was the kind of person who would never fail, a promising engineer with ambitious projects and infectious energy. I was the definition of motivated. But life has a brutal way of showing us the fragility of our certainties. It was after that project failed. In the months that followed, the Anna I knew began to disappear. Vibrant mornings gave way to cloudy afternoons. Procrastination was no longer a bad habit, it was my refuge. I lost myself in hours of endless scrolling on social media, watching perfect lives that weren't mine. My mind was a battlefield. Not. On one side, the voice of conscience screamed, "Anna, you need to get up. You have things to do. Your life is passing you by." On the other, a more powerful echo, the voice of exhaustion. "What for? You'll fail again. Stay here, it's safe." And I gave in, always gave in. My bed became my island. I remember one specific night. It was on that night, lying in the darkness of my room. Despair has a strange ability to push us into places we would never go in normal times. I started devouring everything about human behavior. The theory was so simple, so brutally obvious that it irritated me. This shocked my system. He explained the minimum minute theory. To combat inertia, the theory seemed like a bad joke. So much pain, so much suffering, for such a trivial solution? But the alternative was to keep sinking. My first minimum task was for my room. That den of despair and dust. The minimum ignition point would not be to tidy everything up. It wouldn't even be to take out the trash. It would just be ... to pick up one sock from the floor. Just one sook, and throw it in the laundry basket. I stared at the sock. It seemed to mock me. How pathetic. My minimum minute was to put on my running shoes and walk out the door without worrying if I'd complete the full workout. But the author's logic was relentless. The mind cannot argue against something so insignificant. There's no room for fear. No room for procrastination. It's so small it's not worth fighting. I received an email from my old professor. An opportunity to reconnect with the engineering world. But it would require me to review an entire semester's worth of material in just 1 week for a challenging interview. It's the same kind of pressure that made me crumble years ago. I bent down, smelled the must, the fear of failing again, the smell of shame. The voice of the 97% echoed louder than ever. You're not good enough. You'll fail. Why start if you're going to give up halfway? The most important thing was that I didn't give up. I didn't fail. I became the Anna I always wanted to be. I became part of the 3%. And the shocking truth is this: the 97% wait for motivation to act. The 3% act to create motivation. I tasted the metallic temps of defeat in my mouth. The secret is not in wanting badly, but in starting small. If you felt a shiver down your spine or a tear in your eye, it's because it needed to find you. Your transformation starts now, honoring the smallest of actions to ignite the biggest of sparks. The power to be part of the 3%. The choice is yours. Instead of thinking about the entire week of studying, I forced myself to read a single line. Then another. The confession of a former member of the 97% who found the path to the 3%. And now, the question that truly matters is not whether you believe me, but if you are willing to do something different. There was no motivation shouting inside me. There was just ... action. Small, painful, but action. My stomach churned. The computer screen seemed like an impassable wall. My hand hesitated. was the final battle between the old Anna and the one I was trying to become. The Anna who waited for a motivational miracle, and the new Anna who understood the power of momentum. What would the 97% do? They would give up. They would drown in guilt, in self-pity. But I had the silent truth. I had my first inches, and another. Oh, the air felt cold in my lungs. Not a miracle, but science in its most beautiful form. The inertia of motion. Motivation began to emerge. Not like a furious wave, but like a calm, constant river. The fear lessened, shame dissolved. The voice of the 97% became a distant whisper, and then silenced. I worked for hours, for days, not because I felt overwhelming motivation, but because I had activated my minimum ignition point, and motivation came as a consequence. I closed my eyes. The voice of the 97% tried to pull me back into the swamp. There's no spark, Anna. There's no motivation. You can't. Not with burning motivation, but with a slight curiosity about what would happen if I continued. I didn't tidy the entire room that day. Create it. Minimum ignition point. No matter the magnitude of the task, only the ease of the first step. The noise of notifications outside roared, but I forced myself. But I did pick up the socks from the floor. It was the first time in months that I had done something I set out to do without feeling internal torture. My minimum minute was to open the file and write the date. Nothing more. But then I picked it up, and I threw it. It took 2 seconds, and then ... nothing. No lightning, no burst of energy. But then, something strange happened. My brain registered a victory, a micro-victory. Something I had started and finished. A small release of dopamine. A spark. I found myself picking up another sock. In the following days, I tested the theory in other areas. If I needed to answer emails, my minimum minute was to open my inbox. Just that. If I had to go to the gym. If I needed to start a complex project, the old voice of self-sabotage whispered, "This is a waste of time. You're not doing enough." But the new voice, the voice of the unknown scientist, replied, "Motivation will come after. Trust the momentum." I realized that motivation wasn't a reservoir that emptied. It was a current generated by movement itself. I was lighting the fire, not waiting for it. The resistance from my mind was brutal. Life, of course, wouldn't be that easy. It had one last trick up its sleeve, final test of endurance. The old paralysis returned with overwhelming force. For hours, I just stared at the blank screen, paralyzed. I took a deep breath, and then at the peak of anguish, I remembered that faded book. Don't wait for the spark. I opened ... the file, a simple click. And then, it happened. I got the interview. And although I didn't get the job at that moment, it's a cruel paradox. We believe we need an external force to start. But that force lies in the action itself, no matter how small. I've told you my secret. Do you believe this really happened? A single sock on the floor can be the beginning of your freedom? Have you ever experienced something similar to this paralysis? This anguish of knowing what you need to do, but being unable to move a muscle? If this video touched you deeply, subscribe to the channel. But only if you have the courage to transform your life forever, uncovering the power that silently exists within you.